the Digital Learning Network, for those of you that aren't familiar with us, we are just a group of volunteers who are trying to share ideas and share expertise and really connect people all over the world so that we can do digital learning as best as we can for our audiences. So Helen and I will be presenting ideas today. We are not saying at all that we are experts in evaluation. We're just sharing our experiences. And so I do invite you beyond our presentations to join in those conversations. Any experience, all experience is helpful for each others to learn from. So I'm going to particularly think about sort of deep dive online evaluation today and what we've been doing at Westminster Abbey with our digital learning evaluation. And this is really based on the idea that we've, put some online surveys out to try and evaluate our digital content. And I'm sure we all know how difficult it can be to get feedback from those. So we've moved to a process where we're trying to do more deep dive evaluation. So we really spend time talking to people. And what that really translates to is things like this, which is setting up a situation where you use Zoom, other platforms are available, of course, and have conversations with audience in order to improve our products. That is the main goal. So what I've gathered today is sort of a long list of tips from our experiences of doing it, which hopefully you can use in your own organizations. So before you even get to doing these sort of Zoom conversations, we call them resource reviewers, pick your own nice little phrasing for it. It's really about getting things set up before you get to those conversations where you're using people time. So in terms of recruitment, we go through our own organisation channels, so through social media, through our newsletters. We're looking for really critical friends. So for us, it's been okay that these are people that we know. We know there's lots of audience to engage with that might not know us as well, but when we're evaluating whether our content is right, actually what matters is we've got some really critical friends on side. Always important to outline what you expect of people. If you're asking them to give you their time, how much time are you expecting them to give them? I think also something to be aware of when you're inviting someone to sort of a digital user testing a situation like these is not saying they need to be a digital expert. We have people that are worried that they're going to have to look at something very, very technical, and that's not it. We're looking at how audiences are using it. So all audiences matters. And just as Stuart has done with us all here today, getting permission for things to be recorded, it can be really, really difficult in the moment to capture everything. So actually having these things recorded can be useful. And most recently, we've been doing this with our family at home videos. So a collection of YouTube videos, which are also hosted on our website, which were predominantly created during lockdown. And we want to see whether they're still relevant. Are they still useful? Are audiences still forgiving of the fact that they are filmed in people's bedrooms, things like that? And so actually, sometimes these pre-session tasks can be quite important. So for us, actually, we picked a video and said, can you specifically watch this video before you have a conversation with us, rather than using that time during the session itself? So we've got a situation, we've sent some emails out, we've got people to sign up who are keen to talk to us. And so then that really important thing is, well, what are we going to ask them? We generally run these sessions for about half an hour. If you're asking much more than half an hour, it's quite lethargic for people to be doing. So what's really important is you have a really clear list of questions. And that sounds really, really obvious and patronizing. And it's not meant to be. It's only because we thought writing a list of questions, that's the easy bit. But actually, as we wrote this list of questions, particularly in the last round of testing we did, we realized, well, why are we asking the questions? What do we want to learn from these questions? So I really advise you take time to whack that first draft of questions out, but then go back over and go, well, if I am asking this question, what am I going to learn? And then when I've learned that piece of information, is it something I'm going to be able to do something with? Always an evaluation. It's not just about capturing the data, it's about what you're going to do with it. And I'm sure we'll talk about that more later. Encouraging constructive criticism. Say it out loud. You will not offend anybody. Nobody is going to get upset. You're here to answer difficult questions. For us, this is not about, I mean, some people who will be doing this for funding bids, you might want some nice boosting, happy comments, you might want some marketing comments that you could use, but actually for us, this evaluation is really about, we want to know what's wrong. We want you to tell us what the problems are and the things that we're too close to see. So just really spelling it out that constructive criticism is what we're looking for. You also find that people, you have your list of questions and that's very, very structured, but people don't know your list of questions. So they'll just tell you all the things that are useful. I always think it's useful to sort of tick your way through questions as people are talking and give them a chance to add any more information. So they might have mentioned like quickly about, oh, it would be better if it looked like this. You go, I've got a question about how does it look? Is there anything else you want to tell me? And just really make sure that these questions have been understood. If someone's giving you an answer, unlike a form where you just have to deal with the data you've got this person in front of you. If they're saying something to you that you don't understand or feels a bit different to what you were expecting, ask for that clarification. And a not sort of optional thing here is you might choose that multiple people are going to interview audience members, particularly if you've got lots of these are time consuming to do. So I add a start and an end script so that people are getting consistent messaging. A lot like we all experience going into Zoom rooms where people have housekeeping rules. It's those same things, and so everyone's getting the same message throughout. This is really about the benefit of conversation here. So because you are diving deeper into this information, you've got the chance to say, can you tell me a bit more about that? What do you mean by that? These sorts of open questions are really, really important. And the trick to this is the more it can make it feel like a conversation and less like I'm going through a list of questions, the more comfortable your audience are going to be when talking to you. Screen sharing tasks are always a great idea. I've used them in the past to do things that particularly if you're thinking about your website more broadly and where things sit, this could be a chance to use it. So it could be book a ticket, it could be find a Key Stage 2 lesson on your website, something you know is there, and get them to share their screen and walk you through what they're doing. Now, saying their actions, it feels uncomfortable, you have a bit of a giggle with them, it feels strange, but it's good because you can see what they're doing. If you can take them one step further and get them to share their thoughts, it's even better. I've had instances where, people are looking for something and they go, oh, well, I was looking for this button and I thought these were the words, but then those words weren't there, but I saw these words instead, so that's where I've gone. If they only tell you about the action, you're going to go, well, they followed the right bit of navigation, but it doesn't tell you that they were actually looking for something else. And that sort of, if they do give longer answers, take the time to go back over it with them and say, okay, I think this is what you were just saying. A chance to sort of clarify those points. Reward them. You are asking people for their time. The bare minimum is to verbally thank them on these Zoom calls and follow up with a written thanks, to show that we are appreciative of their time. Depends on your organization. We make a decision that we will carve something financial for them. So that is either a free ticket to an exhibition or to come see the Abbey itself, or particularly during lockdown, we did lots of gift cards. If anyone's interested in gift cards, I avoid Amazon for the various reasons of people hating Amazon, myself included. We use the One for All gift card, and that's one that covers lots of different shops. So lots of things online and lots of things on the high street. And it's quite a flexible reward system for people to have without actually just transferring money into their bank accounts. And talk to your audience about how their feedback will be used. People want to feel valued and want to feel that what they've added is going to be listened to. So explain your process, talk to them about how you're going to go internally, you're going to talk to colleagues, what you're going to do. And always at the end, give them that chance to say, is there anything else you wanted to share? They might have had this key bit of feedback that they wanted to give, but they haven't felt there's an opportunity to. So always make sure you give that to them. And the big one, they've gone and you've gathered all this brilliant information from people. You've found out loads of stuff about your digital learning content. you've got to do something with it, right? That's the whole point of gathering this evaluation. If possible, somebody else should review that footage, review those recordings that you've done with fresh eyes. We've done it recently. We are a team of 3, so 2 of us did the interviews, and then 1 person then consistently watched all the footage back so that they could extract the key bits of information. Write yourself lists of quick wins and long ambitions. The quick wins are really important because otherwise evaluation, it goes into the email system, goes into the documents, you never come back to it. Make sure you're going to do some things really quickly, things that you can achieve, within a month, and then look at those long ambition things that can be start to build into strategies. And an optional tip there of, start building the questions you want to ask for the next time you're going to do this, because while you're fresh and thinking about questions, it's a really good time to do that. That was a whiz through. That was incredibly fast, but I hope it's filled with lots of tips that people can take away. I have put my email address there, and I have put my Twitter handle. Please do get in touch if any of that needs any more clarification beyond the time we'll have after Helen.
So I'm going to talk a bit about, I put interactives here, but actually what I mean is digital stuff in the physical space. So if you've got a museum or a gallery or any kind of physical space, this is just using standard sort of observational techniques to think about the kinds of digital elements you might want to evaluate. That could be things like digital signage, perhaps, screens that are playing videos, if you have an audio guide, or maybe any interactives or touchscreens that you have for your visitors. So I talk here about field workers. These are basically the people who are in the space doing the observation, and that might be you. It might be members of your staff. You might have volunteers. And they're called field workers because they're basically out there and gathering data for you. And it's important that the person collecting that data does know why they're doing it. And that could be, for example, to provide a greater understanding of visitor expectations or knowledge, or it could be to provide learning points for how we do this again. And on the right here, I've just talked about a couple of perhaps misconceptions, because evaluation is often set up as a kind of standard exercise you do just to prove something was good. And actually, evaluation isn't necessarily about finding out success. It's usually a more useful exercise if it finds out what didn't work. So it's kind of teasing out some of those pain points, some of those problems for your users. And also, evaluation doesn't necessarily tell you what to do. It should influence how you do what you want to do. So it's sort of suggesting, okay, this might not have worked this time. Perhaps this is how we might do it again next time. So in terms of observation and tracking in a physical space, some of you might already do tracking in your organizations. It's basically an unobtrusive observation to see how visitors use a space and the elements within it. For example, a digital interactive. And the reason I like doing this is because your digital bits are not treated any differently to other elements that you might track. So it might, it's treated as a completely holistic visitor experience. You're tracking the same way they use these things as they might interact with, 2D displays or navigate entrances, for example. It's just part of the whole. It's really good for recording non-verbal behavior. So gestures, actions, and establishing any patterns and preferences. The idea is that you collect a number of tracks and then you can create a kind of heat map of how people use the space. And you can also combine it with other evaluation methodologies. So if you've got someone you're tracking for a long time, for example, and you're quite interested in why they did that thing, you can also then do a second follow-up activity called either an exit interview or an accompanied visit, where you sort of talk to them about what they did, and does their memory of what they did match what you observed, or you can actually observe them going around and you're sort of hanging behind them and you're making notes as you go, which is an accompanied visit. So when you're tracking people, you find out, as I say, where they go and don't go, how long they spend, which we call dwell time. So if they're sort of watching a video, you can notate how long they're sort of stood in front of that screen for before they perhaps lose interest or the video ends or whatever. And what they do, are they Are they watching it intently? Are they sort of talking to their friend about it? Are they looking at their phone most of the time? You know, what are they actually doing? And then looking at patterns. So over time, you might find that people in particular demographic groups might behave differently. So in the examples I've been involved with, I've often found that visiting groups of children are often drawn to screens with films. Now that might sound obvious, but it's useful to have the data to back that up. And then also probably will influence what kind of content you put on that screen. The screen itself is not, it maybe attracts the family, but it's not going to keep them there if the content isn't suitable. And then, you know, you might observe things like, are people needing to ask a member of staff for help to activate this thing? You know, are there user problems with the item? And beware of the Hawthorne effect. So if you Google Hawthorne effect, basically it's the concept that people modify their behavior if they know they are being observed. So you can either decide to do overt or covert observation. So covert is kind of, you know, you're there with a Mac and a beret and you're trying to blend in and not be seen. And overt is when you're kind of out there with your clipboard and your badge and you say, by the way, I'm doing some observations today. And it's usually a good idea to have a sign up in the gallery saying, we're doing some visitor research today, just so people are aware. The other thing is obviously trying to keep your distance from people as well, so they don't feel too sort of intruded upon. This is my messy map of an exhibition that I evaluated in a museum in Oxford. So you can see basically that in your template at the top there, you mark your sort of basic information. It's one track per visitor. So one sheet per visitor. And you mark, you know, the time they came in, time they left, what day of the week it was, and then any observational information that you can reasonably assess about perhaps their age or their gender. And a lot of that is guesswork, but it's useful for establishing patterns. And the two things, and then you have codes. So you can see there's these letters on the bottom left, so EPCT for engaging or reading something, taking a photo, having a conversation. And the two things I've highlighted here that were digital is AV1 and AV2. So they were two AV elements of this exhibition. And you can see on the top left, AV1, this person did E, so it was reading, that stands for engagement, so reading or watching, and C, conversation for more than 2 minutes. Now what I would do if I could get close enough is then asterisk that, and on the back of this sheet on AV1, I would make a note ideally about what they were talking about if I was close enough to overhear. And you can modify that. You know, you might want to put, if it's specifically a video, you might want to put W for watch. So it's very clear in your kind of data what the action and behavior was. And then what do you do with all that data? You put it in a spreadsheet. So basically in the in the rows all your track numbers. So that's how many sheets you've collected. And at the top is the element. And then you'd normally put the number is how many seconds they've engaged at that thing. We normally say that anything above 3 or 4 seconds is an engagement. Anything under that, and it's kind of a drive-by. So you kind of establish that as your baseline for engagement. And then you might want to then use your letters underneath to create subheadings. So you might want to put AV1 and then a column for watched, a column for, I don't know, had a conversation about it, a column for took a photo, and so on. And then you just put in you convert all that data into numbers and quantitative data. And then how you might express those findings in a sort of report style. We did this exercise of tracking at the Innovation Age Gallery, which is the Science Museum. And then you kind of just pull out some of those big patterns and those big findings. So from that example, from tracking, we found that teenagers chose hands-on interactives and adults used the ones that were had more reading involved. That things like transparent screens, which were a sort of a new technology that they were using, and interactive models had some developmental issues but had promise, so people had struggled to use them but were interested in them all the same. So we saw that as a sort of something with potential. And then also the AV, sort of the for videos that were on a loop, if you sort of caught it halfway through, you'd have to wait for it to start again, and people just ignore them because they didn't hang around to wait for the video to start again. And then finally, talking head videos had the lowest engagement of all. People just weren't interested in them, which was interesting because that gallery was full of talking heads. And so that really then influenced some of the exhibitions that came afterwards in terms of trying to keep that video content a bit more varied to appeal to different kinds of age groups. And then finally, there might be data from the interactive that you can capture in different ways. So if you've got a tablet, for example, set up in your gallery that you've set to a kiosk mode so people can interact with a website or something like that, that device will capture the analytics for you. Also, if you're using web-based content that people are accessing on their own device, on a bring your own device, if you, for example, if they're accessing that through a QR code, you can create a custom URL for that QR code, make sure it's a dynamic QR code rather than a static QR code, because they, once you've created the code, you can change the destination URL, and also they are much easier to scan because they're less dense codes. And then you can check through sort of the analytics for that code about where how many people have accessed that content through that code. And you might have different codes at different points with different kind of alias URLs at different points around your gallery, so you can see if people are accessing the same content from a different spot. And similarly, if you've got audio guides, you should be able to track which of your audio guide entries are the most popular. If you use something like SoundCloud as a web-based option for housing your audio guide, it'll tell you at what point people drop off the audio track, which is also really useful. We had 3-minute audio guide tracks and people are just, shutting off after about 40 seconds. So that's really helpful for us to kind of guide the content and creation. This feels a bit Big Brother-ish, but I have seen this happen where if there's a gallery which has an interactive, there's a little camera behind the user, and that tracks how they use the interactive in terms of their touch gestures on the screen. So it tells you what are they going to first, how are they sort of navigating around the space using that touch interface, and that's quite interesting if you're able to install that. And finally, in the interactive itself, there might be a way of having an end of, if it's a linear experience where people start and then finish, there may be something you can do a pop-up at the end. So you can use a pop-up survey, which might just have 1 or 2 questions about how they liked it, for example. Or it might link through to some other kind of way of rating something with a star or a smiley face or something quite simple like that. And that's it. So thank you very much.